Welcome to the channel. Now today's video is all about one question, as you probably can tell by the thumbnail. Are tools bought from Temu worth their money? Now for those of you who don't know what Temu is an online shopping mega store that sells a little bit in every imaginable category, from electronics to kitchen stuff, garden accessories, and of course tools. Now Temu is still a very young company. It was founded in 2022 in China, but they gained traction rapidly, probably because of their crazy cheap prices. Now they claim they can offer those cheap prices by cutting out all the middlemen that are usually involved and selling from the manufacturer, mostly in China where the labor is crazy cheap, directly to the consumer. In the last couple of months, more and more videos and advertisements are popping up all over the internet, so I decided it's finally time to figure out for myself what this is all about. I went ahead and spent $100 Canadian on a bunch of stuff, and today we are going to figure out if that was a huge waste of money or a really good deal. Now, most of my viewers are actually from the US, so somewhere I will blend in the conversion to US dollar. And by the way, I'm not sponsored by Temu. I used my own hard-earned money for this. All right, let's get started. I'm actually super excited for this. It feels a little bit like Christmas. It came in 2 packages. It took only a week to arrive. I guess the best way to do this here is to open them one by one, review them right away, and then let's separate them into the winners on one side and the fails on the other. Okay, now let's start with the smaller package here. Okay, it's a bit beaten up, but that's okay. All right, so what we got here is a Japanese hand saw, a small version of it anyways. I used to buy those urban Japanese saws. I believe it was around $25 if I remember right. It was a really good deal. They worked pretty well, but unfortunately they discontinued them. So I thought I'd order one of those. I knew this would be a much smaller blade, and that's okay because I always felt like I don't need the length of blade. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So apparently this is an SK5 steel. That's the Asian equivalent of the 1080. So it's a decent steel. Seems to have the same thickness. There's really only one way to figure out if this is any good. Let's cut something. Like most Japanese pull saws, this one comes with 2 edges, one to cut along the grain and one to cut across. Let's try both. This is a scrap piece of 1.5 by 1.5 inch pine. All right, let's go for it. Sorry for the shaky workbench over there, but I can tell you this saw cuts just fine. Now, I personally don't use Japanese saws to cut big lumber. I just have better tools for that. I use them for small stuff, like cutting a dowel flush to my workpiece, or even trying to get into tight spots where I have a hard time gaining access with a bigger tool. And for that, a small blade works actually much better, but that's just me. We have good quality steel. The handle is nice and smooth. It cuts like a dream. And I paid, hang on, $7.37. We're off to a good start here because this is definitely a win. All right, now let's open the big boy here. Okay, and see what we got here. Oh, okay, so this is supposed to be a drill-powered sharpening jig for your drill bits, and I'm extremely skeptical of this one. Let me explain why. Let me show you part of the description. Okay, so first of all, the price of $3.49 is just crazy, but then in the description here, it says something about diamond, which is absolutely ridiculous. This thing has never seen a diamond in its life. This is just an ordinary grinding stone in there, but okay. And just look at the before and after picture here. I mean, come on, guys. This thing is not going to turn an old rusty drill bit into something nice and shiny, but okay, maybe I shouldn't be so critical. Let's just give it a shot and see how it does. So there are no instructions whatsoever, but I think we will manage. It can't be that complicated. There are definitely a couple parts here. Feels like opening a Kinder Surprise. Same quality, that's for sure. Okay. Yeah, I will zoom in for you, but this is super loose, and I was worried about that. There's a lot of play in this. It can't be precise whatsoever, but okay. There are a couple open-end washers, so maybe that will change it. There's just one place for them to go. Let me grab some pliers here. Okay, just lost one. Now I know where there are two. There is actually a nut in there along the shaft, and when you tighten that with the little wrench that it came with, it actually takes out a lot of that wiggle, so there might be still some hope. Let's just try it. Okay, need a dull drill bit here. Guess you're supposed to hold this down just with your thumb, line it up with the stone, and go for it. Switching sides. This is an 1/8 of an inch piece of scrap steel. I genuinely didn't think I can say this, but this thing actually works. Now listen, I'm just an average Joe. I don't own super expensive drill bits, nor do I own a drill bit sharpening tool. The way I used to sharpen my drill bits was just freehand at the bench grinder. And that works for a couple times until you're so off with your angles that you just throw away the bit. Now that will change with this thing, because this thing at least allows you to keep a really consistent angle. I know it's just one little step above the freehand bench grinder, but it is one step above. And I just watched my own footage, by the way, and I realized it looks like on the camera that the stone has already worn grooves in it. That's not the case, it's just the camera angle. It's the plastic behind it that has those 2 grooves in it. So for $3.49, I'm calling the drill bit sharpener another win. Let's see what else we got in here. So this is a tongue and groove router bit set. I'm looking forward to test those actually. Let's see how much they were. It was very cheap. $12.70. Wow. So some people are going to be mad at me for saying this, but I have a really hard time justifying buying the expensive brands like Freud. Like a Freud tongue and groove router bit set would cost me at least 6 or 7 times as much. For something that I use maybe once a month, sure, if you use them every day, you will be able to tell the difference. But I own probably a dozen Freud router bits and probably 3 dozen of Chinese knockoffs. And so far, from a guy who doesn't use them 8 hours a day, they work pretty good. Let's hope that's the case with those two. Let's open them up before we test them and see how they look. I might change my mind here. Those might be the first Chinese knockoff router bits that I'm actually scared of using. They look good. They feel good. The bearing feels nice. They're quite big and substantial, and that's sort of where the problem is. The carbide teeth are pretty far away from the center, so therefore they will travel with very high speeds. And for that, a 1/4 inch shank just doesn't feel enough. In my opinion, this should have been a 1/2 inch shank. There's no way in hell I'm going to have my fingers close to that when I test them. But maybe I'm just too cautious. Maybe they work just fine and can handle the load. We will see. Let's test them. Well, the good news is I didn't get hurt. I dialed the router down to a slow speed of 12,000 RPM. I guess that helped a little bit. it was cutting just fine. There was no excessive vibration or anything. The 1/4" shank is still holding up so far. There's only one problem. The joint is a bit too loose. I mean, there might be the odd circumstances where you want that, but for a glue joint, this would be definitely too loose. But I took a closer look at the packaging and I found this little Ziploc back here. It has 2 super thin washers in it. So it looks like the router bit is adjustable to a certain degree anyways. So I'm just going to go ahead and then install those 2 washers and then let's try again. Now that is a beautiful tongue and groove joint. I had no issues the second time around. Honestly, I would give them a 10 out of 10 if they only would come with a 1/2 inch shank. That being said though, if you use them with some caution, if you keep the speed down and wear some protective gear for just in case, I really don't see a reason why you shouldn't go for this. So for a price point of $12.70, I'm gonna call the tongue and groove router bit set another win. Now for the next round here, I think I'm just gonna combine 2 items because they fall under the same category, which is power carving. Now this is a carving disc for your angle grinder, and that is a sphere that you also can attach to your angle grinder. I do own already a carving disc from the company Cuts All, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a brand from the US, works fantastic. The only problem is it was very expensive. It was $85 and they come in different grids. The one I own is medium, and sometimes I was wishing I would have a more coarser carving disc just to get the majority of the beginning stages done much faster. So I'm hoping that this disc will do the job here. Let's just open it up and see how it looks. When I look at the packaging, I do wonder who sits in the marketing department over there. Just look at those pictures. Like, this dude is just cutting something on a table saw. It has absolutely nothing to do with this tool. That's fair enough. This guy is carving this cool statue. Okay, whatever this is, kind of makes sense too. And no, you're not going to carve a perfectly round bowl with this tool. Nor are you going to carve this thing, whatever this is. It looks like a stump. And most certainly you're not going to carve out a perfectly square table. This is just hilarious. Apparently this is made from tungsten carbide steel, so that's good. If we look at the way they designed the grid here, it looks quite different from the Cuts-All disc. This looks a lot cheaper, but it doesn't mean anything until you try it. That's where I ran into problems. I do own 2 angle grinders, and both of them have a 5/8 of an inch shaft with 11 threads per inch, which is the North American standard. But when I tried to install this thing here, it just didn't want to fit at all. And after measuring the inner diameter, it turns out this is actually 14 millimeter, which is the European standard because they use the metric system. I'm so sick and tired of those kind of problems and buying tools twice. But this was clearly advertised to work with the 5/8 of an inch shaft, so that's really a bummer. It's a bit different with the carving disc here. This is supposed to be a universal fit to fit them all. And as you can see, it fits quite nicely over the threads, but down at the bottom here, where you don't have any threads anymore, it wiggles around. Now usually in all your disc, the hole is big enough to fit the 7/8 raised edge here. That's how you would center your wheel. But I guess in this case, you're supposed to use the outer edge of your flange nut to center this, because it does fit perfectly in here and there's no movement. It's a little bit awkward, but I guess it works, so let's try it out. As you could see, this carving disc removes material real quick. That's what I was hoping for. There was no excessive vibration, so I'm actually quite happy with this thing. And considering that I paid only $5.58, I'm gonna call it a win. For the sphere, I paid $16.56. That is very cheap, but completely pointless if I can't use it. I'm really disappointed about the misleading information on their webpage, and I will contact them about that and see if I can resolve this. But it comes at the cost of my time, and that is really frustrating. So unfortunately, because I can't really give this a review, I have to call this purchase a fail. let's move on. Next on the list, we have probably the smallest package in here. Those are a bunch of mini saw blades for a Dremel tool in different diameters. Now, to be honest, that is something you barely will ever use, but in the last couple of years I had probably once or twice a moment where I thought this would have been handy to have. So let's open it up. Well, not much to say here. 5 saw blades. Let's put them to the test. You primarily would use this for wood or plastic. Got a wooden dowel here and some PVC pipe. Yeah, that worked just fine. I mean, I didn't expect anything else. Let's try the PVC pipe. Yeah, that worked really well too. I was worried this would gum up, but it doesn't, so that's nice. I mean, to be honest, this doesn't get me crazy excited here, but I tried to find a set like this online, and the cheapest one I could find was $8–9, and I paid for this one $1.98, so that is very cheap. And you know what? For the one time every 5 years, I'm gonna be happy to have this, so there you have it, another win. There are still more in here. Now on the next one, my curiosity got the better of me. Now this is a set of 5 drill bits. And they do look a little bit like Forstner bits, but they're definitely different. They actually come in really nice packaging. They start with 16mm diameter and go all the way up to 25mm. Now the drill bit itself is about 1.5 inch longer than a standard Forstner bit, and they're carbide tipped, so I'm really curious to see how they perform. What caught my attention originally though is the spiral. I'm so confused by that. Like, usually the purpose of a spiral on a drill bit is to move shavings, but in my mind, on a Forstner bit, the shaft is just way too far away from the sidewall to move anything effectively at all, so the shavings would just drop down the hole again. So why bother machining this? It would be much cheaper just not to do that. I have one theory. Maybe this factory also produces drill bits, and it's cheaper for them to set everything up just once and machine a couple 100,000 of them, and depending on the demand, either turn this into a drill bit or weld the Forstner bit on it and sell it as this thing. I don't know. If you have an idea what's going on here, or if I'm just missing something, please let me know in the comment section. Now let's throw this thing into a drill press and drill a hole. It looked like for a moment it moves the shavings nicely, but look at this. Those are very compacted clumps of shavings. So yeah, the spiral doesn't really do the trick. But I have to say though, the carbide tipped Forstner bit cuts like a dream, very smooth and very clean, very fast. And that becomes even more obvious if you compare this to a traditional Forstner bit. Just look at all the smoke from the friction and all the dust. I'm producing more dust than actual shavings with a traditional Forstner bit here. It works, but it doesn't work well. Meantime, on the left here, I'm already all the way down there and all the way through super clean shavings. Now, in conclusion, while this thing does look a little bit funny with those spiral grooves, it is an excellent drill bit. I mean, it does deliver a high quality cut. It comes with some extra length, so that's a bonus. And I paid only $23.48 for this. I tried to find a comparable kit of carbide tipped Forstner bits on Amazon. You would end up paying at least 4 times as much. So there's really nothing bad to say about this. And I'm happy to report that we got ourselves another winner. Now, for those of you who are not subscribed to the channel, I recently bought and restored a woodworking lathe. I will put a link to that video in the video description here. And I really enjoy working with it, especially making wooden bolts. I really enjoy that. But I struggle with sanding the inside. And after watching a couple of videos on YouTube myself, I realized that a lot of professional people use just a little sanding pad for your battery-powered drill. And that's what this is here. This kit came with 50 different sanding discs from 80 grit all the way up to 3000 grit. I'm not going to waste your time on any testing. It's just hook and loop sandpaper. You have two choices. You either stick your sandpaper directly on the holder here, or you put this little spongy buffer in between, which I think is kind of neat because that will allow you to adapt to uneven surfaces a little bit better. Money-wise, I paid $7.98 for that. I did a quick Google search. I found a similar kit plus a couple buffer wheels at Canadian Tire, and they want over $40 for this. And it's the exact same thing minus the buffer wheels, so that's crazy. Without a doubt, this kit is another win. Believe it or not, there's one more in here. So what we got here is a little carving tool set. It's a set of 4 chisels. And I have to say right away, they got me on this one. I thought those chisel ends would be a lot longer, but let's take a closer look. According to the description, they are made from high carbon steel and they come in those 4 different shapes. I was just under the impression for some reason that they're a bit bigger, but it doesn't mean necessarily that's a bad thing. Now, if I look really close, I can tell already this edge is not sharp at all. So that might need some work here. Oh boy, this one is really bad. Okay, so let me sharpen them off camera real quick and then let's try them out. Now, the one good thing about them being so small is it won't take you long to sharpen them. Now, that chunk over there is red oak, by the way, probably not the easiest to carve into, but they did just fine. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is certainly not a high-end quality carving toolkit, but nobody expected that. That being said, the steel itself feels pretty good. I mean, if you ever hand sharpened your own chisels or planer blades, then you start getting a feeling for how good quality steel has to feel like, and I definitely had worse in my hands than that. Now, the 2 flat chisels would be kind of easy to make yourself if you have an old saw blade or a planer blade kicking around, something with good quality steel. But why bother? I paid $6.29 for this. Like, if you're a guy like me who just likes woodworking but is not a professional carver, who just wants to tip his toes into that topic, I think this kit is a great way to go. So luckily I can wrap this up by saying that our last product, considering the price and what you get for, is another win. I am amazed at how much stuff I got for under $100, and we only had one little hiccups with this carving tool here, and this might be a good tool. I just didn't really have a chance to test this. So to get back to the original question, tools ordered from Temu worth their money? As far as I can tell, absolutely. But I would like to add a couple things. Let's think about tools in 3 different categories for a moment, from bad, middle to good. It looks like what you can get on Temu is somewhere in that range. Now that happens to be the same range as my local hardware stores, at least to 80% of it. None of this is high-end, but it's also not the bottom of the barrel. It might look a bit more fancy in your local hardware store, might have some branding, for sure will be quadruple the price. But in the end of the day, if you trace it back, most of the stuff on their shelves comes from the same factory in China, so there's that. If you are lucky enough and your bank account allows you to play in this category, Temu might not be for you. You're probably better off to buy your tools from stores like Lee Valley Tools, where it's almost guaranteed that you get a high-end, good quality tool, or you just order directly from Festool or whatever other fancy brands are out there. Unfortunately, my wallet is not deep enough for that. Also, I have to point out that this online store has a really strange assortment. Like I mentioned earlier, they seem to have a little bit of every category, but if you look for something specific, there's a good chance that you won't find that. So as of right now, this online store is not going to replace your local hardware store or other online stores, but I definitely will put Temu on my list when I shop around and try to find a good deal. Now, before I end this video, I would like to share something with you guys. About a week ago, I got an email from a gentleman in the Netherlands. His name is Michiel. He's going to laugh at me for butchering his name right now. He said he watched the DIY jewelry box video on this channel. You will find the link down below. And he felt inspired enough to give it a shot himself. He also mentioned he's a beginner and this was his first serious woodworking project. But yeah, look at those pictures. Beautiful work. This piece was made from walnut and he didn't use any paint like I did. I think that was a great call because it really brings out the nice natural color of the wood grain. And if you look at the layout, it looks exactly like in the video, which is really surprising because I didn't say a word about the dimensions. So well done, my friend. You definitely got some talent there, and thank you for sharing. Now, if you have a project that you would like to share, and of course it doesn't have to be related to this channel, then just shoot me an email. You will find the email address down below in the video description or in the description of this channel, and I will try to add your projects towards the end in future videos. All right, well, that was it. Thanks for hanging in there. I know this video is a bit longer than usual. I hope you got something out of it. Take care, my friends, and I will see you on the next one.